Welcome to a new update. It is time for Bitcoin to have an update. Of course, the markets have been running to $53,000. It is higher than I personally anticipated. Are we going to continue running towards 100k? Because the standard is constantly happening when it comes to the market, which means Bitcoin runs up, there is a certain narrative, and that certain narrative requires everyone to say that it's just going to go ballistic from here. In this update, we're going to talk about the previous news events. Of course, we're talking about the inflow. I'll give an insight into what Ethereum is doing at this stage. And we're going to just have a look at the markets and everything that's happening. In order to continue making this content or even better content, have conversations with guests. If you do like me to interview a guest, which one would you like to see on this channel? It is something that we're thinking of to do on YouTube. We're doing a lot with the branding as well. We're doing a lot of thinking about the content to be improved. So if there is any guest that you would appreciate, make sure to comment that in the comment section beneath. Also, make sure to check out the part regarding the consultancy. We can assist you with everything that we do in this cycle. We can build portfolios for you. We can give you strategies for everything that you need to survive in this crazy market that we live in. And to be fair, I do believe that the markets are going to continue like this, but reality needs to kick in for everyone who is involved into this market and who is looking to actually trade or invest into the crypto markets, because it has been a week, right? Also subscribers I mentioned, in order to, it's completely free, but the more views and the more subscribers that we're getting, the larger the reach is going to be, the more we are able to get those guests to get to more content, spend more time and effort into the videos. So make sure to do so. When we're looking at the markets, I've got the chart up here, which is Bitcoin, BTC, USDT. Currently, and I think it's just a fair guess, this one video has been shot on Thursday evening. So my fair guess is that the price of Bitcoin is going to be perhaps lower than the current price of Bitcoin, given the fact that we've just anticipated a rally of close to 35%, I would say. Let me see. I think it's like 35%. Oh, so close. 37. So what is happening after such a run when the narrative is basically not as large as we think it should be? And I'll get to that in a little bit. I think, honestly, we get towards the end stage of this entire pre-halving run. And to be fair, I think macroeconomics are going to take over again. But there are so many topics. First of all, we've got the inflow on the ETF, and there are so many layers in the data that we got on the ETF that we need to make sure that we use it in an adequate way, because using the inflow as a narrative to suspect that the markets are going to go rallying from here is definitely a reasonable suggestion to do. But saying that it happens now is a stupid thing to do, because there are so many variables you cannot confirm. Even what has been happening with the interview with Putin, perhaps it has been triggering institutions to say, okay, well, I mean, the debt level is so high, the default risk of the US is going from 0.5% to 1%, and based on that, I need to reallocate towards assets that have a safe haven, or are like a hedge against not entirely inflation. Well, technically on the long term they are, but more an inflation against the bankruptcy of a country. It is a variable, but we cannot calculate the actual data behind it. Now, the inflow is great. So we have seen 5 days of inflow that is more than 500 million on a day. I think one day it was 300, but at least it's more than 2 billion, which shows that the institutions have a lot of interest into Bitcoin. And I think the narrative behind it is the halving, and it's the fact that it's a store of value based on numerous factors. So the inflow is great. But then when you look at the inflow, it is not like they are the only buyers. I mean, they just come into the markets with such a liquidity that is unprecedented, okay? But there are still sellers. So one argument could be, okay, we've got 5 days of this inflow, who knows who's behind it, but this could stop at some point, which means that the markets go back into reality and we just get a gradual correction, because at some point in time, when the value is super high for Bitcoin, the buy power is going to dry up, sellers take over, you move the markets down, and then the buyers step in again. Second thing is, but maybe it is a temporary interest, and from here we start to decrease the amount of money that's going to be allocated into the markets through the inflows. At the moment of shooting, we've actually seen a case that the inflow starts to scale down. So we went from 500, 600, 500, 500 to 300. Perhaps it's lower even after this point. Or perhaps there are two things which could happen, is that inflow is going down, sentiment follows, price follows down. Inflow remains positive, but sellers take over, markets go down, sentiment switch. All right? Because just the inflow is not a reason for Bitcoin to go into 100k in 2 months. It is nonsense. It could be that Bitcoin is going to run to 100k based on the inflow if it is consistent for a longer period of time. Because you need a lot of money to keep it moving forward, and in between people will start to take profits, and also the ones that are stepping into the ETF right now, and when it reaches 80k, they need to rebalance their portfolio, so there will be sellers. So my theory is, honestly, is that we still are in a period where Bitcoin is doing really well, where we're getting into a period where Bitcoin is going to find a potential temporary top. We rotate towards Ether, and the current sentiment regarding the ETF inflows is mega bullish for the long term. It is the liquidity that we need to get a bull market going, but it's not going to be the one that triggers the bull market to go to 100k in the next 2 months. It's just use the brain. So I think I've been mumbling enough about this, but now we need to look at the markets overall, which is, if we look at this case and just at data, what we can see is Bitcoin has been running from 15 to 25, has been running the exact same amount here from 20 to 30. We've seen the exact same here from another in-between push. Here we've got a pretty heavy move, and that has had the biggest narrative, which was the Spot ETF, resulting into a 96% push. All right. That's value. That's a very important event. This is 36%, which is a pretty heavy run as well. No correction in between, and I think we're on the edge of having one. So technically, long-term investing, buying here is plus EV, because in 2 to 3 years time, Bitcoin is most likely going to be valued more than it's today. So that's plus EV to do so. In terms of trading, it is not. It has been trapping me. It has been pushing it towards a level that I was not suspecting. But a few important things have been happening. First, if you look at the previous runs, in the previous run, we took out this liquidity, right? So we took out the liquidity, we corrected. Now we took out this liquidity as we are here, and it's very likely that we're going to have a correction like this and have a period of consolidation before we can continue moving. I suspect still, and to be fair, I've been wrong on the case that we're building a range. Well, perhaps we are actually still building a range, but it just went a little bit higher. I was suspecting that we were going to TP here, but it's a little bit higher. Honestly, I think the sentiment is going to change in the coming weeks, and I think it either is going to be macroeconomic events or it's just the ETF inflows what is going to be changing the entire market structure. I don't know. Anyway, it's one of the two. And then we're finding ourselves in a potential take profit area, perhaps going to be around 53 to 57k. From that standpoint, I think the halving is going to be having the pre-halving TP. Halving happens, corrections, always around 30%. So I think, again, also with macroeconomic events, with the inflation probably remaining sticky, we have a 30% correction from 55k to perhaps even 40k. And from there, we continue to run up. To know for sure that we're going to peak out or get close towards one is knowing that each Bitcoin is rotating. All right. When ETH Bitcoin is rotating, or at least there is some more buy pressure happening here and still in a range, so there's not much happening. But ETH against Bitcoin is going up while Bitcoin is going up too, which means that people are rotating from Bitcoin to ETH, which means that the buying pressure is losing value, losing power. Hence why I think that a peak on Bitcoin is coming really soon. Although we still suspect that a potential run of Bitcoin to 53 to 55k is definitely possible. But I guess that we're going to have some sort of consolidation, and I'm not sure how deep it will be, but just going sideways, have some retest, and from there we can continue moving. But I think the momentum is going to switch towards Ether. Macroeconomic events going to take place, which are important to understand. Macroeconomic events in the sense that inflation is going to be sticky. Perhaps they postpone the decline of the interest rates. Denkun upgrade is happening on Ether, which is a positive influx on the layer 2s, which is pushing the value of Ether even further up, and it has been lagging behind heavily. And I think that given that Franklin is also interested into approving or doing an application for a spot Ether ETF, I think that there is a likelihood that the Ether ETF is going to take over the momentum. Hence why, if the market's correct because Bitcoin corrects, I think Ether is going to correct less. So that means that the Bitcoin pair goes up. And if that's the case, you know for quite sure reasons that Bitcoin is topping out, which means they're rotating towards USDT partially to use that to buy the dip on altcoins is plus EV, but also rotating towards altcoins already makes a lot of sense. All right. So what do I suspect when it comes to Bitcoin? I think ultimately at this point, I think we're going to peak at like 55k. Perhaps we are going to peak short term here. In terms of trading expectations, I think looking at a bounce play at like 45 to 48 is definitely a go-to zone. Peaking here, and then we get a deeper correction, because ultimately this upwards run is going to give a correction. I think it's going to be a relatively organic and healthy bull market, which requires those corrections to take place. And those corrections, as you remember, every 20 to 30 to 40% correction on Bitcoin is a buy. So just use those opportunities to do so, and you'll be fine. Next week, I'll be providing 2 updates again. Make sure to stick around. Follow me on all the other platforms where I share my view. I'll see you again. Ciao.